Hey everyone, welcome to episode 100 of More Layers. I'm Seth Mariano.
And I'm Jordan Smith. And for our 100th episode, we're kind of doing a follow up of sorts to our last episode. Because in the last one, we paid homage to an actor who passed away. But this time around, the actor that we're kind of paying tribute to is still around, but she recently announced that she has cancer. We're talking about Christy Romano, specifically, from voicing the lead role in Kim Possible. And this episode will basically be kind of doing what we did last week, just with this show. And on the off chance that she sees this, she'll know how much we appreciate her and her work.
Yeah, so for context, sort of, Romano recently announced publicly that she tested positive for cancer. According to what I've read, it's not an official diagnosis. There's going to have to be further testing done, but it does nonetheless sound serious, and I've definitely been thinking about her a lot, and I know, Christy, you've been through so much, even over the course of your career. You've written and talked a lot about, some of the personal struggles that have come with, with the pressures of working hard and fame, whatever. And just, I think it's been very brave of you to speak so honestly about all that, and I just want to express my support for you, and just wish you, a happy future, and and I'm looking forward to your book coming out. She's writing a memoir, apparently, that's to be released in the fall, called Once Upon a Train Wreck, and I'm looking forward to that, and just thank you for just sharing so much of yourself with the world, just pretty much being you, and just giving so much of yourself.
Yeah, I second everything Seth just said wholeheartedly. The kind of career that Romano's gone into is definitely not easy. It's very competitive, for one. And when you're in the public eye, it is very difficult to keep things personal and or secret. So the fact that she didn't have to let the public know about this and did anyway is a sign of bravery in a way, because cancer is, at any level, a very serious thing. I don't know exactly how severe the cancer is, but it's never easy to deal with in any capacity. So I'm sure she's going to be displaying a lot of bravery, a lot of strength, more than a lot of people who live their day-to-day lives. I've never experienced cancer, and I don't know too many people personally that have gone through it for an extended period, so I don't personally fully grasp just how difficult it can be to struggle with it. I can only imagine that it's an absolute nightmare, and of course it's very scary for anyone who's going through it, or any one of their family members or close friends. So Christy, if you do see this, we wish you all the best. We hope you get through this and come out the other side in one piece, and we're supporting you with love, thoughts, and prayers. And God be with you, and speedy recovery.
Yeah. So, yeah. And so, as we mentioned a little bit ago, we are discussing one of her most famous works, Kim Possible. At the time, she was cast in it at pretty much the same age, or around the same age as her character was. I think she was 16 when she was cast in the role. And Anyway, so Kim Possible was a big hit animated series for the Disney company, and it followed the day-to-day life between school and crime fighting of the titular girl, Kim Possible. She's kind of created as a sort of new attempt at female representation that wasn't seen that normally, from what I understand, in the media, and probably especially kids media. And she's living a normal, your typical life, going to high school, doing cheerleading, and then when the bell rings, she's off and off, fighting some crime overseas or something.
Yeah, this show debuted back in June of 2002, and it ran until September of 2007, not including reruns that they would have aired after that. It was supposed to not last that long originally, but we'll get into that in a minute. But this show has many of the tropes you see in a Disney show centered in and around high school, especially given the two main heroes are high school students. That being said, though, it takes advantage of the superhero and crime fighter aspect as well. Seth was just saying a moment ago that they kind of bring the two together. There are many episodes where they do that, and they take full advantage of it to create many unique stories, or, at the very least, putting a unique spin on stories like them that we've heard before. We've seen many stories, like Superman, for example, where they're trying to live a double life between superhero and work or school. And Kim Possible is kind of like a teenage Batman in a way, where she doesn't necessarily have any powers, but she has a lot of gadgets. She has somebody sitting at the desk helping her out. She's, of course, got a sidekick who I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit. But while this show does have a very familiar setup, the way that they go about it is actually quite different.
Yeah. It was probably, in a way, you could say, considered revolutionary for its time, because as you had a leading lady, but a girl, doing stuff that was mostly associated with males, sort of strength and athleticism, but at the same time, she wasn't just simply strong and athletic. She was also a human being with a normal emotional range and insecurity and whatever. In a way, it was she was like almost a female Spider-Man in a way, and she had this sort of like athletic ability and some stunts you'd see her do, but also at the same time was a teenager, kind of figuring herself out at the same time.
And just as a little quick side note, you may have noticed by her name that it sounds very much like the word impossible, and this is something that they have acknowledged in the show at least a couple times that I can think of. And her friend Ron Stoppable, his name is a play on the word unstoppable. That isn't acknowledged as much, but it's still there. And one such example of her name kind of being acknowledged that way comes in the opening sequence of the movie that came out in 2005 called Soul of Drama, where she's fighting off these bad guys and they say, "It's impossible." And she goes, "No, but real close." But with this film, came out in 2005, and it was advertised as one of the first animated Disney Channel original movies. And kind of like how the Lizzie McGuire movie is treated as a kind of series finale for that show, this movie was originally intended to be the series finale until the show was renewed for a fourth season. And they did take advantage of this just a little bit, as later episodes would imply that the film is integrated into the story. They could have just had the movie be its own separate thing, like a spin-off of sorts. But they didn't do that. Like, one of the main weapons, I guess we'll call it, that the villains use is talked about in a future episode after this movie. So it is integrated into the timeline, which not all movies like this do.
Just the thing I probably appreciate about the series most is that it didn't try to just follow. It tried clearly, I think, to buck a certain trend, but at the same time, it didn't try too hard to do it just for the sake of doing it. It felt like Kim was a kind of character that anybody could probably, maybe male or female, see themselves as, and she's just a regular, relatable character who just happened to do things that a normal person in the real world probably wouldn't.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing that's appreciated in shows like this. Like with how we talked about Lizzie McGuire last week, the main character is the type of person that you could see in everyday life, minus maybe some of the fancier gadgets and how she's able to just freely travel around the world. But, she's a high schooler. She goes through typical high school problems or excitements or whatever, different events that you would expect. She, of course, has a life at home with a couple brothers and her parents, both of which are super smart. And you got the crush, you got the best friend, and many other high school tropes. But there's so many things this show did that is really appreciated, especially when it comes to how they don't necessarily defy expectations. It's more like they take what's familiar and put a unique spin on it. And one thing that this show does really well, at least in my eyes, is highlighting its villains. They could easily be the type of villains you see in other cartoon shows where they're basically the villain of the week, where they just show up, they're defeated, and then you don't see them for a while. Yet somehow, they find a way to give them quite a bit of spotlight without it being overwhelming, especially the main two villains, which we'll talk about, I'm sure. And this is especially given with how many different villains they have in this show. There's actually more than I remembered when I was writing down notes to talk about this show. There's definitely a good handful that they cycle through, but they still have other ones that aren't as common that still pop up every once in a while. They do have a handful of one-off villains, but even some villains that you think would be one-offs, such as one that shows up early in the show called Gil, they do sometimes make a return, even if it's brief.
Yeah, that is interesting. I think I maybe noticed that maybe with maybe a pair of villains that I saw in one early episode as I was rewatching the series on Disney Plus to prepare for this. Yeah, I think maybe there was that one, I think it was like a Latino guys duo trying to like start like an overseas club or something, and then they showed back in a later episode or something. Yeah, so yeah, it's interesting that they could have easily just given them one story and then be done with them, but then they figured out a way to, I guess creatively and not annoyingly bring them back again later.
Yeah, another example, while they're not necessarily villains, is Shigo's family, who kind of act like the Incredibles in a way, because they're like a superhero family of sorts. But they had one episode where they kind of talked about them, showcased their abilities, and even said, hey, this is where Shigo comes from. And then that could have been it. They could have just left it there, but they brought them back in another episode further down the line. And when it comes to the villains in general, especially with the main two, Draken and Shigo, I really do like how they play against the typical villain stereotype that those two could have fallen into. Normally, the main villain is the most threatening or more intelligent and tactical or reasonable, while the sidekick is usually the goofy one or the one that's a little bit more clueless. In this show, for the most part, it's kind of flipped in a way, whereas Shigo, the sidekick, is typically the voice of reason or the smart one, the more tactical of the two, while Draken is a bit more of a doofus in some respects, even though he is technically a genius. They still have them display those stereotypes every so often in one way or another, but it's usually done in a cleverly subtle way.
Yeah, Draken comes off as sort of a very visionary villain, but at the same time doesn't probably plan stuff through very well. And Shigo tends to have a bit more a sense about her, and she can be pretty savage in her dialogue at times, but she does seem to have a bit more wisdom than he does.
Oh yeah, and she even calls him out a lot of the time when he's being a little ridiculous or if she thinks what he's doing is kind of stupid. And even though she could have easily knocked him out or left on several occasions, she sticks around for whatever reason. There was even an episode where he takes control of her mind using a chip alongside Kim. And she says at the end, even though I was obeying your every command, I was still aware of everything that was happening. Do you have any idea what listening to you was like? And that could have been his end right there. But no, she sticks around, and they show in little tidbits here and there that the two of them actually care for each other in some capacity. Like there's an episode where she goes on vacation around Christmas time, and even though he wants her to stay around, he still covers her costs just because he can and wishes her a Merry Christmas, and in return, she goes back out of her vacation to save him, and by the end of the show, it feels like they're starting to form a special connection, which is something you don't really see.
And there's one particular episode I was just thinking about that's it's titled Blush, and from what I read, it is inspired by I think Romano's own modesty and tending to blush at praise, and basically it follows Kim, pretty typical girl storyline, admittedly, insecure around the crush, and then but somehow, Draken comes up with this, what at least he thinks is clever scheme to kind of take advantage of her sensitivity to embarrassment and plant this sort of I don't know, like vortex thing on her body to make her shrink if she gets embarrassed enough or something. So it's like like there's that scene in the Spider-Man film by Sam Raimi where the Goblin Mask is telling Willem Dafoe's Norman, you really want to get to the enemy, you gotta attack his heart, and that's kind of, I guess the kind of thing that Draken had in mind here, kind of trying to really get her where it's gonna hurt, and so it's the relatable girl storyline combined with the sort of silly crime fighting plot.
And you kind of see that happen a little bit in the movie, where Draken creates what looks like a good-looking high school guy. And he uses him to get through to her. And for a while, it's actually working. She's lowering her defenses, and she's very vulnerable, and he takes full advantage of that. And of course, he's a villain, so it doesn't work out in the end. It kind of backfires in some capacity. But, yeah, he's done that before. In fact, there was an episode, I forget which one, where Draken had this kind of research lab thing going on, and he had a section dedicated to teenage life called Teenage Wasteland, where he's like, I'll finally get into her high school head. I will know her fatal flaw. So he has attacked her directly or tried to get inside her head or get to her psyche, see what sets her off. And he does prevail at least a little bit every so often.
Yeah, but somehow Kim is always able to kind of win at the end, it seems, and somehow it seems like more often than not Kim is the most confident, most resilient perhaps she'll ever see, and but again, probably what makes her such a likable character isn't her strength as much as it is her authenticity, her being the whole wide range of emotions on screen. And definitely kudos to Romano for really bringing that out. I think she has a natural way of doing that, and then of course you have Ron, voiced by Will Friedle from Boy Meets World. And it's essentially similar to his Boy Meets World character, more or less goofy, very energetic, and so there's definitely some plenty of professional talent there.
Yeah, and fun fact, that guy actually, thanks to my sister a few years ago, sent me a nice little birthday video, which was really cool. The heroes in the show are kind of like the opposite of the villains, in that the main hero is the smart, usually more reasonable one, where Ron is the stereotypical goofy sidekick, which they even kind of poke fun at with several times, even to the point where the villains don't even remember what his name is half the time. But despite that, he actually does contribute quite a bit. Sometimes he is the cause of the problem. Like there's one episode where a guy is thankful to Kim for saving him and his family or whatever from an avalanche, and it's implied later that Ron was the one who started that avalanche. Or when Ron tried to save the day on his own as a kind of Secret Santa Christmas gift to Kim, he got a boat ride, and the driver was like, wait, there was somebody with her that destroyed my radio and whatever. So even when he is helping, he's still causing problems. But I will get to a point in a little bit where he defied all expectations by the end of the series. Now, granted, this is going to be a little bit of a spoiler for those who haven't seen the show or the ending of the show, so just be warned. But before I get to that, I want to talk about another character that kind of goes against the norm, and that is the commonly seen teacher at the school by the name of Mr. Barkin. A lot of high school shows, especially with Disney, there's usually at least one teacher that many of the students, for one reason or another, cannot stand. Usually it's because they're mean, or because the kids feel like they're getting too much work from them, or they're way too strict. He could also fall into the stereotype of being strict or obnoxious in a way that the students just don't care for. That being said, he still has quite a few moments where he has his own highlights in the show, whether it be emotional or hilarious. And being voiced by the legendary Patrick Warburton, you know he's going to be very funny at times. The students even show that they do respect him, and by the series finale, they do have a fun or genuine connection with the guy.
Yeah, it's kind of like those characters, you hear about, on the outside, they're super tough and serious, but at the end of the day, if you can maybe say this about this particular character, they're just, they're really looking out for the best of the kid.
And he even goes out of his way to kind of make a fool of himself every once in a while. Like, there's an episode where he falls in love with Shigo when she is a good guy temporarily because of a device. And even when she turns back into a villain, he goes out of his way to travel to the villain hideout, stand outside the door, and start serenading her, despite the fact that he cannot sing. So he definitely has that very stoic exterior, but he does have a softer side in there.
The old cliche singing outside the window scene. We've probably seen that a million times.
And again, because it's Patrick Warburton, it makes it even funnier.
Yeah. Oh, man.
But let's see. So this is where I'm going to start talking about the ending a little bit. I don't know if you watched all the way through the series or if you don't want me to talk about the series finale.
I don't know. I'll put a spoiler warning probably in the description.
Okay. So just like so many other things, whether it be the teacher, the villains, the heroes, whatever, even the ending of the show goes against the norm. And this is after they renewed the show, after they originally had a different finale. In this final confrontation, one character, this is another example of a character that shows up once and you didn't have to see again. She comes back and brings somebody else with her in the finale to try and take over the entire planet. And sure, the heroes come together with the main villains, stopping even bigger evil. And for obvious reasons, it's usually the main hero who saves the day. They're usually the one to deliver the final blow or make some great big speech before the villain disappears forever. But in this final fight, even though the main hero does help a lot, it's ultimately the goofy sidekick that defeats the big bad duo in the end, and by himself, no less. And he does so by using this special skill / ability that he obtained earlier on in the show that we've only ever seen brief glimpses of up to this point. And the show in general does a great job, especially by the time the finale rolls around, at providing good payoffs to plot points and elements that were set up earlier in the show.
Yeah, that's one of the coolest things, when you have a gag or something, like early on in a story or a series or something, that looks technically inconsequential or it looks like it doesn't really add anything to the story or anything. But then in a big climactic moment later on, it serves a big purpose, it turns out. That's, I'd say one of the coolest things, one of the hardest things probably to write, but it's cool when it happens.
Yeah, and it's kind of, in a way, the showmaker saying, I know this seemed like a one-off thing, but we just want you to know that we haven't forgot about it. We had this whole thing planned, and we're going to utilize it the best we can so that you enjoy it. The ability that Ron uses is a primary example. There's even one or two whole episodes dedicated to him kind of learning about it and how to use it, and then it goes a long time without him even touching it. And then he'll just pull it out again, like the showmakers are saying, hey, we haven't forgotten about this, we know he can do that. But there are just so many moments like that that show that there was genuine love and passion put into this show, with how all the characters are, how the different plot elements come together in one coherent story, one coherent ending. It's just well written as a whole.
Yeah.
And in a second, I'll gladly go into a couple of my favorite episodes. But I don't know if you had other comments.
Yeah, I think I was just going to say, there was, I think it's evident there was so much heart and ambition put into this show, plenty of creativity, and from the first glimpse of it from the promo I remember seeing when I was a kid, it was pretty much Kim Possible. She can do anything, but it turned out to be, when I rewatched it on Disney Plus, even more than that. It was a story, a multiple season story of an every girl, but the one difference, she's this sort of kind of bigger than life heroine. And there's a lot of talk nowadays about gender and female representation, more than there was even at the time of the show, I think, and probably about the Bechdel test, which is a test of female representation in media, which I think this show would pass with flying colors. And it succeeded probably because it was different. It flipped stuff on the head, and because it allowed people to see possibilities that they probably hadn't thought of or seen in any film or show before.
That's really what makes the show so special, is that it's relatable, but it's still unique and different. And Kim Possible, while we can't do everything she can for one reason or another, she's still viewed as a fantastic role model. And she, of course, is not the only strong woman in the show. Shigo is another prime example. In fact, there's so many so many people, so many fans of the show that even now show admiration for characters like Shigo, because even though she's the bad guy, she's one tough son of a gun. But going into a couple of my favorite episodes, one of them is called Emotion Sickness. In this story, Draken and Shigo are raiding a scientist's laboratory. Kim and Ron try to stop them, and in their fight, Kim and Shigo both get a device stuck to their neck that we find out later allows it to switch up their emotions at any time at the touch of a button. And that throws everybody involved for a loop in one way or another. A lot of hilarious hijinks, some genuine concerns, and the hilarity that comes with some of these antics is just priceless. Like when Kim and Shigo both are set to be extremely angry by these devices. Ron goes to hide so that he doesn't get hurt. And when he finds what he thinks is a good hiding place, Draken's already there. You wouldn't expect him to be hiding, especially in a similar location. But Ron gets in there and Draken is just like, find your own hiding place. And when they call dibs on who gets to stay there, it's like, you win this round on your dib calling, but that won't save us from them.
Yeah, and was there another one you had a favorite?
I did have at least one other one. In fact, this show is filled with good episodes and funny or solid moments that I could go for a while, but I obviously don't want to go too long, and I heavily encourage people who haven't seen the show to check it out themselves so that they can experience it for the first time too. But the other one that I will talk about is an episode called Bad Boy. And this is the start of kind of a 2-episode payoff. They're not back-to-back episodes, but there's a device called the Attitudinator that takes all of the good from someone and replaces it with bad so that they're just all around evil, and vice versa. If they're a bad guy, then they'll suddenly become a good guy. And the two that get affected the first time the first episode that is introduced are Ron and Draken. So Ron becomes a psychotic bad guy, even more so than Draken was. And Draken becomes a very sympathetic kind of a dweeb in a way that you can't help but love him. And through this device affecting him, it leads to one of my favorite moments to quote with my sister, where he creates a device that you think could be catastrophic because it causes shaking, it could cause earthquakes if it's turned up severely enough. But all he wanted to do with it is make the perfect glass of chocolate milk. And he refers to it as Cocoa Moo. And for whatever reason, the way he says it is just so funny to me. And it's even funnier when it shows Shigo getting quickly annoyed by him saying it that way. But every once in a while, I'll just talk to my sister, reference Cocoa Moo, and we get a big laugh out of it.
Yeah. It's kind of like when me, Jordan, and maybe another friend or two of ours, we quote SpongeBob dialogue to each other. We can, I've probably mentioned this before, we can pretty much pick up on it, know the next line, and just go for it. It's one of the best things.
Yeah, it usually starts off with maybe a couple of us quoting something from one of the episodes, and then by the time we're done, there's like 4 or 5 of us standing in a circle just quoting random scenes word for word from SpongeBob, and it's always a hilarious time because we're always giggling, trying to do the characters' voices, even doing something as simple as imitating Plankton when he's running back and forth trying to play a giant harmonica.
Right. Right. And we'll probably do a whole nother discussion on SpongeBob sometime soon.
Oh, I'm sure we will, even if it's just covering one season or somehow the entire show when there's like 15 seasons at this point or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been at least 25 years. Yeah, it's like started in 1999. So yeah. About 25, a little over maybe 26.
Yeah, it was definitely the late 90s, because I know some people have acknowledged that SpongeBob is one of the few cartoons that started off before the turn of the century that is still going.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And even though Kim Possible wasn't nearly as long of a running show, it still is like SpongeBob in that it's very funny, it has a lot of quotable scenes and moments, and as we keep saying, it keeps things familiar while still doing a lot of things different.
Yeah. Yeah, and Kim Possible, I think as I've kind of said, I guess, very empowering, very creative. I'll have to watch a lot more on Disney Plus to kind of really appreciate it more and more, but I feel like from what I've rewatched, think I've found plenty to appreciate about it.
Yeah, and just a little tidbit for those who might be intrigued by this. Draken is voiced by John DiMaggio. And I know he's an actor that a lot of people like, so if you know him as Bender from Futurama, or Jake the Dog in Adventure Time, or a handful of others, if you like those roles, you will love him as Draken.
Yeah, well, I think that's going to do it for today. Thanks everyone for streaming, and keep up with us on YouTube and YouTube Music, and share your thoughts, your ideas, and just say what you have to say.
Yes, and thank you for sticking around for 100 episodes with us. We're so excited that we've gotten this far. And we're just doing this for fun. We just love talking about these things. So we've done it 100 times now, and we're going to keep this going. So let us know what movies or shows you want us to talk about, or if you have thoughts on previous episodes, including this one. Let us know what you have to say. What's your favorite Kim Possible episode or moment? And please join us in our support of Romano as she goes through this difficult battle, and let's pray that she comes out of it safely.
Yeah. Again, best wishes to Christy Carlson Romano, and again, thank you for just speaking out against the raw, not as talked about truth of show business and how difficult, old and dark it can be, and just for your open genuineness and heart, and just best wishes to you, and we'll see you all again soon. Take care.
So long, everyone, and happy 100.